Hello, everyone, and welcome to the business meeting of the Kalamazoo City Commission for Monday, November 18th. I would like to call this meeting to order. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Here.
Commissioner Hess.
Here.
Commissioner Knott. Commissioner Pradel.
Present.
Commissioner Urban.
Here.
Vice Mayor Griffin.
Here.
Mayor Anderson.
Here. Is there a motion to excuse Commissioner Knott?
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Cunningham, support by Commissioner Urban. All those in favor to excuse Commissioner Knott, please say aye.
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 All opposed, nay. Motion passes. Commissioner Knott is excused. For our opening ceremony tonight, we do not have anybody here for the invocation, but I would like to suggest that we all spend a moment of silence recognizing the fact that a young man lost his life to gun violence in Kalamazoo here over the last few days, just to think about the loss of that life, the tragedy, and all the families involved. Thank you. Thank you. Now is the time for the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioners, you have before you the agenda for tonight's meeting. Are there any changes you would like to see? Is there anyone in the audience here to speak to an item on the consent agenda? That is items under F. If so, you need to ask that the item be moved to the regular agenda. Are there any such requests? Seeing none, the agenda is as stands. For communication, are there any communications, City Manager Ritzman?
Yeah, there's one item this evening. Actually, we are entering into budget season for developing the 2020 budget. So we are planning our first work session on December 9th. That's a Monday here in the community room at City Hall. The published times are between 5 and 8 p.m.
Thank you, Manager Ritzman. Next is the consent agenda. City Manager Ritzman.
We have two items this evening. First is the approval of a contract supplemental change order in the amount of $94,743.60 with Stantec Consulting Services Incorporated for the design and removal of the Millen Park Dam and bank restoration for a total contract amount of $144,743.60. And finally, adoption of a resolution approving the purchase agreement with the Northside Association for Community Development for the parcel located at 447 West North Street for an affordable housing development. This item is being held until December 2nd.
Thank you, Manager Ritzman. Commissioners, the requested action is to approve item 1 and hold item 2 until December 2nd, 2019, and authorize the city manager to sign all documents on behalf of the city. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Support.
All right. Motion made by Commissioner Urban, support by Commissioner Hess. Clerk Borling, please call the roll.
Commissioner Hess.
Yes.
Commissioner Pradel.
Yes.
Commissioner Urban.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Griffin.
Yes.
Mayor Anderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. Items on the consent agenda are approved. Nothing on the regular agenda. Next is reports and legislation. City Manager Ritzma, any other report?
Yes, I would like to call forward Steve Brown, who's our Foundation for Excellence coordinator, And if you recall, we began a program this last summer into the school year with the Youth Mobility Fund, funded by the Foundation for Excellence. And there's some recent developments that I want Steve to provide to you and the public on what's happening with that program. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, City Manager Ritzema. Mayor Anderson, Commissioners. What I'd like to do is share some really excellent news with you that we have had since its inception in August, 73,000+ uses of the Youth Mobility Fund passes. So just as a refresher, the Youth Mobility Fund is a unlimited ridership program we've created in partnership with Metro and the Kalamazoo Public Schools, where the high schooler's school ID now operates as a bus pass. Additionally, I'd like to call out the Kalamazoo Public Library, which is a partner in that this is also a library card, so it's part of the one card system with Kalamazoo Public Library. So the success of this program is really, it outpaces anything that any of the partners had expected. We did a test phase this summer with KRESA's YOU Summer Youth Employment Program, and we looked at the ridership from those approximately 370 young people. We extrapolated what the ridership might be for this first pilot year, and we're at about 30,000 uses per month, which is outstanding because we're talking to young people, we're talking to families. They're going to KVCC for credits for college while they're still in high school. They're going to jobs. They're picking up younger siblings. They're unburdening their parents from having to leave work early to pick up their kids from school. They can get back for the late programs, which include basketball, theater, you name it at the schools. So it's a really outstanding program, in addition to the out-of-school time sector programs that are opened up for these young people. So with this ridership have come some challenges, and we're very aware of that, and we're working with partners to address them. So very briefly, some of those challenges involve capacity on some of the routes. Those are predominantly between 2 and 4 p.m. on the bus routes that serve the high schools, especially Central and Norix. So what you have is you've got young people who leave the school and they have a bus that's immediately there to pick them up, and they can fill that bus to capacity. And that's a challenge in that we're not able with Metro, at least immediately, to put in additional capacity into the system. So that would be effectively a separate bus to come and pick up remaining people. So all those young people arrive at the Kalamazoo Transit Center at once, and as you can imagine, that can overwhelm the transit center itself, and that if we don't have the positive situations there to receive the young people, to guide them to the connecting buses that they have, or to get them interested in other positive opportunities, you can have a number of young people with not the right thing to do there. So that's been a challenge for behavior at KTC. That has quieted down over the past weeks, but we're still aware that for long-term sustainability of the program, we need to be really on top of creating positive outcomes for all those young people. Another challenge has been working with partners to make sure that the system itself just runs very smoothly for everybody involved. We originally had intended for the cards to have the single card that was the high schooler's ID, and it was then just the stock was changed so that it would work on the buses. There's a pretty significant complication this fall that required us to issue 2 separate cards, and those were issued in a plastic case. This was, it seems like forever ago now, but this was back at the beginning of the school year. It was a great workaround on the part of Metro, but because there's 2 items, that is rife, as you can imagine, for one of them to get lost, for one of them to get broken, and then we have had some instances of misuse of the program. So we're working very quickly to get the one card system up and running. So that would be a reissue of those cards approximately between January 13th and February 2nd. So that would be after the Christmas break. And in terms of ordering inventory of getting the technology here, that's as fast as we're able to do it, working with the vendors. So we would then, as of the beginning of say, February, have the one card system as it was intended in operations. In the meantime, we are going to be issuing a sticker that validates current IDs. What that sticker does is it lets all of the drivers on the buses know that the IDs they're dealing with have been validated by the school system and that they're okay for use. So with the new ID, there's an opt-in option, and what that does is it involves putting the rules and the regulations and a kind of a positive statement in front of students and families. so that when you're getting your ID, you're very aware that all riders, regardless of age, regardless of purpose, on the Metro system are subject to the same rules and regulations. To have that signed by a parent, guardian, or a representative of the school, and for the young people to sign that themselves and recognize it as well. So as a privilege, it also comes with its responsibility. So these are ways to address some behavior issues that we've had. Although limited, they have in some cases been significant. And then also the capacity issues that we've been facing. And what this does is make sure that we're setting the program up, which of course is a pilot, and pilots are subject to adjustment and kind of right sizing and making sure that they're working for all the stakeholders, make sure that it's sustainable and that we can keep it going year after year for everyone in the system. So Metro sees about 2.8, 2.9 million rides per year. Currently, Youth Mobility Fund is about 12% of the ridership. To put that in context, Western Michigan represents about 19% of their ridership. So there's a very significant jump in use of Metro, which everyone celebrates. I mean, it's great to see all these buses full of young people getting where they need to go. But of course, it's a real-world program, and real-world programs have, of course, real-world growing pains. So I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has. I'd also like to point out that we had a positive meeting recently with KidNet, which is Kalamazoo Youth Development Network. They represent a cohort of 60-plus out-of-school time youth organizations. So those are organizations that are outside of the daytime schooling. Can be after school, can be weekends, can be summer. And we're looking to get toward a place where instead of viewing this purely as a transportation program, it really has a youth development lens, which is part of our learning curve. We thought that this was really fundamentally about transportation. And although the transportation is what we're providing, really to make that provision possible and sustainable, it needs to be seen through a youth development lens, which has all of the kind of complications and nuances of a youth development initiative. So we're really super proud of the partnership with Metro, all that they've done, Kalamazoo Public Schools, the principals, their support staff, the administration have been fantastic partners. Kalamazoo Public Library has been very supportive as well. And with KidNet, we feel that we really have the partnership to drive this forward in a positive way. So.
Thank you, Director Brown. Questions? I saw Mr. Urban's hand first, and Mr. Cunningham, and Rachel, is that okay? Okay. Everyone has questions.
Wonderful.
Steve, I understand that there's the city public safety department has withdrawn its officers from the KTC. I guess because the demands of the authority were more than the city could supply, given that that's not the city's primary responsibility if there's emergencies and the police have to be called. So I see that you're addressing this whole program is addressing the problem of difficulties at the transportation center. But do you know what the transportation authority is going to be doing to provide for public safety at the transportation center?
To clarify, and of course, Kalamazoo Public Safety would be the organization to speak to their future plans.
Yeah, so you're here, but
it's my understanding as of today at the Metro board meeting that no decisions have been made by Public Safety or Metro, but I do know that they have had discussions about this, and that Metro is exploring its options for the future for what security at KTC would look like.
Okay. Well, that's kind of on the negative side of everything. You've been very positive, and I really like that. But I thought if you had some good news in that area, that this would be a good time to talk about it.
Manager.
Yeah, I see the chief back there standing up, but that decision or the thought of withdrawing has nothing to do with this issue with the Youth Mobility Fund. That's more about staffing and getting public safety officers on the road. So, and they're looking at other options, the CCTA.
Yeah, it's basically their issue. And what you're talking about is just a segment of the total of what goes on at KTC. So
Correct.
that's
Yeah,
good.
And they will be responding to calls for service at the transportation
Okay.
sister, KDPS will.
All right, good.
So-
Thank you.
Commissioner Cunningham.
So, so I did respond to correspondence that was sent to us earlier today with a laundry list of questions, most of which I don't think are pertinent to the community or big ticket items. One of the things that I think the community should at least be clear on is kind of that process. When it comes to individuals that we can communicate with, who should we, if we have questions or concerns in regards to these potential changes?
Absolutely. So I'd say for parents and families,
Yep.
KPS is absolutely the point of contact.
Yep.
The letters and communications come directly from their administration after going through the partnership and being, of course, vetted and drafted and looked over. That's the point of contact. They certainly have those relationships and those mailing lists and that connection. If people have particular questions about buses, bus functionality, KTC, those should go to Metro. I think broader level options, you could certainly direct people to me, and I'm happy to answer any questions, or get people where they need to go for those answers. I would say for parents and families, if they feel like they haven't gotten the communications yet that they need, stay tuned. I know that there's letters being sent this week. They're being translated into Spanish and Arabic, and that's an important part of how KPS does their outreach. We've already seen the monitors, like the ones we have here in Commission, have the notifications up in at least Norix High School. So of course, it's a very large organization. There's multiple. We've got the 4 schools involved: Phoenix, KILP, Central, and Norix. So the rollout will be happening this week. And if people feel like they need more information, by all means, please contact their KPS administrator. But I'd say hold tight, and they should have the information early this week.
I guess I do have one further question. So the Foundation for Excellence assists with this process, correct? With the transition to the opt-in process, has there been conversation on what that process looks like in regards to whether a parent has to be present, or what does that kind of look like?
Absolutely. That's a very good question. So the letters are consistent with KPS communications in that they're addressed dear parent or guardian, but from the very beginning, it's consistent with KPS in that it's a case-by-case, student-by-student scenario. So every student should be taken exactly as just that student and whatever that student's circumstances are. So administrators and/or community and schools daytime staff are aware and ready and able to sign these letters on their behalf. So if you have, for example, if you're a youth that's experiencing homelessness, if you're in transition, if any of the many circumstantial difficulties that could happen are happening for a young person, we're there for them. So we hope that really every single student gets treated exactly as a special case and as a student. So.
Commissioner Praedel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of my questions was about communication and just about KPS's capabilities to make sure that both parents and guardians and the student are aware of the changes. The other question was just about KPS's capacity to help serve in this role with the change. Do you have some sense of how they're planning to manage that, or I guess both transitioning to the new system, but also like the token system and those sort of things that are going to be used in the short term and long term?
So yeah, to take the question broadly from the start, is the communication is of course part of the larger communication process that KPS has. You know, they're sending letters home, they've got their own newsletters, they have their newspaper. We've tried to make use of all of those assets in each school, as well as for direct mail and robocall. So we recognize, you know, the schools are a bureaucracy and they've got their own kind of burden of communication, but they've been very good in making sure that we're not only part of that, but we're strategically part of it, so that we're, you know, getting people's attention at the right moment. If, you know, down to the nitty-gritty of the parents are saying, look, this is the day before break. If I get a letter today, it's going to disappear forever at the bottom of my inbox, and then at the end of vacation, we'll look at it at the very last minute and think, you know, we really should have done this sooner. So timing those things properly so that they get the best attention and give parents and everybody really the maximum chance to act on them. There was kind of a follow-up part of that question that you had about the tokens, excuse me.
Yeah.
So the schools each had their own various procedures for tokens, but tokens, and just to clarify, that was where the schools could pre-buy physical tokens from Metro and keep them on hand if somebody was stuck late, if somebody's ride couldn't show up, if somebody had to get back and forth to a school event. And each school kind of had their own procedure, but it was really on a case-by-case basis that was administered, in some cases by teachers that were after school, at school after school hours, or administrators that are there. And so during this transition, we've made very clear that the Foundation for Excellence is going to fund these tokens and that we want to be consistent with historic practices. So we don't want to be any more restrictive or any more kind of generous with them. We just want to make sure that, again, every student is taken as a case-by-case scenario, and that if for whatever reason they can't get the letter in on time, that they have access to these tokens. So.
I think that was, just, I guess this is sort of a question as well, but one of my backgrounds is I was involved with Teach for America, taught in South Chicago and Los Angeles, and you see that these barriers to access, how they exist in returning things from home, and especially when you become accustomed to having all those barriers to access removed. I guess my question is how do you envision a process to kind of evaluate this down the road to see if all of a sudden this new system has caused unexpected consequences where we see the numbers significantly drop from individuals who need it, or if that makes any sense.
Excellent question. So 2 ways to look at it, and I don't mean to be facetious, but my list of after-action review points grows every day. It's a very large program with large partners, and we're moving it, we're rolling ahead, but there are, of course, things that we feel now we could have done better, and moving into next school year, there are opportunities to redo some things again that we can do better. One of those things would be, for example, with the opt-in, is just making sure that it's there as soon as it can be in front of parents. To the point of a reduction in, so by opting in, what's the reduction in overall dispersal of the passes would be, I guess, a way to phrase that. So there's about 3,700 students, we'll use that number, and the passes were given out to all 3,700 students with their school IDs. So we're fielding a survey right now to follow up on what I'm about to say, but a large number of students have cars and they don't need the pass and don't actually want it. Now that doesn't necessarily matter if it's a one-card pass, because you have to have your ID to get into the school. So that ID has a value both in the real world and psychologically. Right now we've got the 2-card system, and so since the second card is effectively anonymous, if you have a card and you don't need it, it becomes kind of a throwaway. And it's just extra inventory in the system that we want to make sure we get rid of. So those are some lessons learned. Also, there's a few parents, I think there are very few, but are a few parents that would prefer that their student didn't have access to this program. So the opt-in allows them to say, we don't feel that our child is currently ready for this program, or they only need it seasonally for a summer job, but not during the school year. So those are some things that come immediately to mind for changes that are being, that we're making and that we'll learn from in the future. So.
Thank you.
Vice Mayor Griffin?
Thank you for giving us this update. I do have a couple questions, but just to clarify, so have there been changes that are made, or are you guys in the process of evaluating what changes should be made?
So there are changes that are being made now, yes. So the opt-in letter was announced in the schools this week. The letter is going out this coming week. So there was a timeline issue there within the schools and within the partnership. Not ideal, but we're rolling ahead and trying to make sure that we've got 100% coverage in all the ways we need to communicate with parents and stakeholders. So those are the following, is that we have the pause in the program after school from 2 to 4 p.m. to address the capacity crisis, which there really is no other way to get at in the short term. We're also instituting the sticker immediately so that we can validate the inventory that's out there. So the IDs that are good and that students can bring themselves and say, this is my ID, we're validating those with the sticker, which is a tamper-proof sticker. And then the opt-in letters have between now and January 13th to be returned. That opt-in period, I should be clear, it continues all the way to June 1st. So we're not being restrictive, we're just saying that the opt-in letter needs to be returned between now and January 13th, so that there's an overlap when the old ID is turned off. So if you come into this, if you're transferring into the system, or if you didn't have an ID all year, but you feel that you need one for a summer employment opportunity, you can still opt in by June 1st. So.
Okay, thank you for clarifying, because I found out about the changes via social media, and I think you probably touched on this a little bit about maybe there was some error in communication, but just so the general public is aware, we didn't know as commissioners necessarily about the change. I found out like everyone else did, so I do have a couple questions, and I know that you're not the only one on this, so hopefully you'll be able to answer those, but who was involved in coming to this decision as far as youth or parents, any community leaders? Is there any sort of like public participation plan that has to take place before making these changes? And I realize there were challenges that had to be addressed, but who was involved in actually making these changes?
So the core partners are Metro, Kalamazoo Public Schools, and the Foundation for Excellence. So those are the three entities at the table that we're looking at: the ridership, operations, capacity, safety. Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety had a voice there in that they had been called in to help assist with some of the urgent safety issues at Kalamazoo Transit Center. And this was really at a point of trying to address issues that we felt were a threat to the overall sustainability of the program quickly and sensitively and sort of surgically, just targeting the issues as best we can. Keeping in mind that if you've got a crisis, drawing the timeline out, even for the best of intentions, can worsen a problem or create larger challenges around the challenge. Moving forward, there's something that's become extremely clear, which is that we need to work better with partners, with youth voices and with community voices to create probably a more formal organization with those stakeholders to be able to sit down and have every decision discussed and mediated, at least large decision about the program's direction with those groups, so that we can build the positive management culture around the program moving forward.
Thank you. I'm glad to hear that moving forward that there will be other folks involved, because I think at least what I got out of the letter, the program will experience several modifications to encourage positive student behavior and interactions within the transportation system and to help maximize general public ridership during peak travel times. I think it gives the impression that the entire program is being changed specifically because of issues that are happening with behaviors, which I know that there are some serious issues that need to be addressed, but that narrative, it kind of doesn't lend so much to the ridership and the capacity issues that are there that may really need to be addressed. So for a parent like me whose child rides this and takes advantage of this between 2 and 4, it kind of made me wonder, who was involved in this and how did that go about? And I do have one other question as far as the issues that have been happening. Do you know the percentage of that versus the total ridership, or was there an attempt to kind of pinpoint the particular players who were causing problems that may have influenced any changes that need to be made?
Absolutely. I'd say on the bright side, for 73,000 uses, the documented incidences of serious misbehavior or actual criminal behavior or physical endangerment of anybody are vanishingly small. We don't have actual numbers because a lot of this is a value decision about from a driver or from kind of in the moment what's misbehavior. We say several dozen. Let's say several dozen. Now, some of those have resulted in arrests. There have been assaults involved, and So those are significant, and the challenge there is that when you have a serious issue like that, it really only takes one to come up on everybody's radar. So the bright side is the overwhelming majority of students on the overwhelming majority of rides have been, as the drivers of Metro themselves say, been outstanding. They're doing exactly what we would all hope them to do. They're doing what probably a lot of us when we were younger wouldn't have done ourselves, which was behave really well on public transit. I'm just speaking for myself there, to be real for a moment. And so I think that's really the bright side of the program. But urgent matters are urgent matters, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Urban?
Yes. I'm picking up on what's going on now. So if the problem is capacity between 2 and 4, I'm curious, what are the options about getting more buses for that period, even temporarily, or borrowing extra buses that are even school buses from other jurisdictions temporarily? And I guess it's a matter of finding the drivers to drive them, I suppose.
So there's a couple aspects to that. One is for adding additional Metro buses, for example, they call it a kicker bus.
Right.
We would really be talking about a bus with a union driver to drive one single route for 2 hours a day, which sounds very easy until you consider the lack of efficiency there and how difficult it can be to bring in extra capacity to a large system like this. So it's being discussed, but it's in some cases such a small problem that the solution is almost too large. Ironically, when you mention school buses, these moments of capacity issue happen at the end of school when the school buses are available. And the program was intended to create mobility, however that's deemed necessary by family and students. It was explicitly not intended to supplant or replace the existing 110 school buses that KPS uses. And we've seen shifts from the school buses to Metro. So we just want to be sure that when we're considering these solutions, we're not sort of enabling behavior that is not part of the core mission of the program, and maybe resulting, kind of enabling in some misbehavior and misuse of the program. So,
Well, thank you. I think that's just a way of saying that things are very, very complicated, and one has to proceed with deliberation in solving these problems. Thank you.
Further questions, commissioners? So thank you very much for coming and talking to us and having very detailed answers already. So I appreciate that very much. Just as a reminder, just for all of us, but for everyone watching, is that the city no longer operates the bus system. It used to be the case for decades that the city actually ran transit. That is no longer the case. It is its own legal entity. We still do have some kind of business relationships. So some questions will be better directed to the transit board and related to decisions they're making. So it's an interesting kind of a confluence of interests without direct control in certain ways. We got a funding side here, then we've got the KPS side and whatever their relationship may be with students, and then we've got the transportation side. So further questions that we may have might have to go to that one entity or another, or the consortium, or that sort of thing. So if we need to further think about it, maybe to take you out of the spotlight here for a moment, it might be good to ask
Good point.
KPS or Metro Transit about some of those things. But that said, I think you did a great job of kind of communicating that, so I appreciate that. Anything else on this, Manager Rissman?
Nope, that's it.
All right, thank you so much.
thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah. All right. Next is the opportunity for citizen comments. Just keep it in mind that you have 4 minutes. You can write your name down after you're done if you would like. And yes, sir. There you go.
I'm Nehemiah Scudder, and I live in the Rickman House at 345 North Burdick. room number 303. And in the past, I've been homeless for a relatively short period of time. Although I had a roof over my head, we had no running water, and that made it complicated. So I know quite a few of the street people that have had problems with homelessness. And I noticed that the Foundation for Excellence was advertising on the back of their newsletter they sent out free to a whole lot of people, that they had something like between 130 and 140 low-cost housing units that might be rented by the homeless, I presume. And I'd like to see these housing units and find out if they really are low cost. Because what's low cost for the Foundation for Excellence may not be low cost for the street people. There's some problems there, I suspect. I'm kind of appointed myself as liaison between the street people and those who would try to provide things like homes for them. And there are lots of complications to that, and other people have also, I think, somewhat appointed themselves as liaisons. David Anderson, our mayor, sir, has been in charge of housing for ex-mental patients partially, and he has helped me along the way, and he may want to give me a few pointers as to what to do and not do in this project. But I would like to inspect the 130 or 140 housing units that the Foundation for Excellence claims to have got, see if they really are low cost, and try to make some progress towards advertising this to the homeless so that they can take advantage of a place this winter when it gets cold and people need housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I'm Jeff Carlin from Kalamazoo, and I'm here in opposition to the sanctuary city status of Kalamazoo, which I heard that you unanimously voted for. And I would like to introduce you to this book by Michelle Malkin. It's called Open Borders Incorporated: Who's Funding America's Destruction? And the short answer to that question is George Soros. And so I just want to make these names known to you, Michelle Malkin and George Soros. And when you get the time, please go on the internet, look these names up, and research this subject. It's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening. My name is Maddie Jordan Woods. I'm the director of the Northside Association for Community Development, and I live at 902 West Patterson. And I'm here to invite you all to the graduation for the certified nursing assistants. That dollars came from SPK. So there are 8 graduates, and Bronson has already worked in, and hopefully we will know in a couple weeks if they will be employed by Bronson. And we are putting together a memorandum of understanding to continue the program and with other partners that are involved. So it is Thursday from 1 to 3, and if you are available, you are welcome to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Jeff Messer, city resident. Tonight is the first regular business meeting of the 53rd Kalamazoo City Commission, and the commission has a new chairperson, aka mayor, for the first time in 12 years. So this seems like a good time for the commission to reconsider its standard operating procedures. And some people ran for election on promises to increase opportunities for citizen participation and increase the transparency of the commission. So I have 2 specific suggestions on how those goals may be furthered. First, the City Commission agenda packets. Currently, we have a final packet that is available on the Friday before the meeting, 3 days before the meeting. We used to have a draft agenda that was available on the Wednesday before the meeting, in addition, and that gave people 5 days to think about most of the items and read them, sleep on them. You get a lot of good, deep thinking done when you sleep. So 2 more nights helps you with that. Post stuff online, talk to people in person, contact city staff, business days, 2 additional business days to contact city staff about things that are on the agenda, because most of these items will just appear once. They're not where we're selling property or zoning or a new ordinance where they're on the agenda for a first reading, a second reading. They'll be on just the agenda once. So having 2 additional days would really help. So if you could direct the state clerk staff to bring that back, it would be greatly appreciated. Secondly, I would like, as I mentioned at the meeting on March 5th, 2019, I would like the commission to reconsider its standard operating procedure of automatically excusing all commissioner absences. This didn't become an issue until last term, when one commissioner was absent, not tardy, but absent for 9 meetings, resulting in a 19% absence rate for that commissioner, which I feel is unacceptable. There currently don't seem to be any consequences for commissioners missing meetings, especially not 9 meetings in a term. You know, if you miss 9 meetings, you get paid just as much as the commissioner who missed 1 meeting. And I think there should be some consequences or incentives to attend meetings, and I do think this has partially been enabled by the 4-year terms that were enacted in 2015. I think someone thinks in the first 2 years of the 4-year term that they don't have to be as dedicated to their duties. And so we'll see when those 4-year terms end if the attendance improves. You know, I don't know what difference it really makes. I forgot. I asked Clerk Borling, what difference does it make if the commission excuses an absence or not? I don't remember. I don't think it makes a difference one way or the other. But I would like to see either some penalties or encouragement to get commissioners to commit to their duties. And I do understand there's budget meetings and subcommittee meetings and stuff, additional meetings to go to, so maybe cutting a commissioner's annual salary by 1/24 for a missed meeting may not be fair. I don't know, but I would like to somehow encourage the commissioner who had 9 absences last term to improve the attendance. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Other citizen comments? Appreciate that. Just a quick question here, Clerk Borling, related to draft. Any report on that, draft minutes or draft agenda, final agenda?
So when I started here at the city, agendas and agenda packets were published on the Friday before the meeting. Then in, I'm going to say 2000, let's see, I'm going to say maybe 2005, the city commission started meeting on Friday mornings in a committee of the whole meeting where they would review the agenda. And that's why the draft agenda started being published on Wednesday, to give people and commissioners an opportunity to review the agenda before it was discussed in a public meeting on Friday mornings. Time went by and the committee of the whole meetings fell out of use, and so with that then we kind of went back to the old schedule of publishing agendas on either the Thursday or Friday. Sometimes they come out on Thursday, sometimes on Friday.
Just one follow-up question here. We're using a new system now too, right?
That's correct.
Do you want to talk about that just a little bit?
So with it was actually last meeting in terms of the public portal for our agendas and agenda packets. This meeting, in terms of having actual business items come to the commission through this system, we are using now a new system called Civic Clerk. It's similar to the old system in the sense that it provides the agendas and agenda packets electronically, online. And so the biggest change is probably internally what staff sees in terms of their use of the system and entering items and getting those routed through review and approval processes and so on. But it is a new system. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Commissioner Urban?
Yes, well, that doesn't answer a question I want to put. Is it really true that there's only one chance to see the agenda before meetings now? Because I really depended on that earlier agenda packet release as well. If that really has been dropped, I would be strongly try to encourage us to reinstitute that. There are other ways, I think, for us to learn about things, but it's not just us, it's the public at large. So I'll just let you answer. What's involved with reinstituting a preliminary agenda? I know you have to put in there some qualifier that says subject to change. People have to understand that because things do get finalized in the last few days of the week before a meeting, and we want to be able to continue to do that. But a heads up on a lot of things, especially over a weekend. Nothing can get done that involves the public, any public official, over a weekend. It's not like Walmart. We're not open then.
Okay, so when what Mr. Messer was talking about, that Wednesday agenda, that draft agenda was a public draft agenda. It went out to the same distribution group, people who have asked to receive notification when an agenda packet is ready. That same distribution group for the final published version of the agenda, that same group got notification that a draft agenda was ready. When we stopped doing a public draft agenda, we do still create a draft agenda that does go internally to staff so that they can see, hey, is there something on the agenda you thought was going to be on the agenda and it's not there? Same thing with commissioners, but that isn't public. If the commission wants to have that be a public draft agenda, it's simply a matter of asking that, that's what you want. And, that's something that can be done.
Be in order for me to move that we reinstitute that draft agenda publication going out to the general public?
I mean, you can do anything you want as far as that goes.
Vote it, just have a decision by the commissioners this evening, or does that have to be researched?
I mean, I would suggest that we, just give ourselves a minute here, and we can follow up on that. Would that be helpful? And we can talk about any internal issues, whatever related to it, so we're making an informed decision. I mean, I don't personally have a problem with it either, but just want to make sure that we're making a fully informed decision about that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, as long as we arrive at a decision soon. I'm sure we want to be thorough about it. If we need more time for that, but not much time. I don't see it's that big a deal because it was in place at one time. So we're not plowing any new ground.
I mean, I don't disagree. It shouldn't take us a long time. I mean, any other thoughts about it?
Well, I'll leave it to you. I just expressed my wish, and I'll leave it to you how to go from there.
All right, appreciate that. All right. Well, now is the time on the agenda for commissioner comments. Somebody wants to go first tonight?
Doing this differently?
Okay, we'll try to.
Hey, I'll take first.
All right.
First dibs. I guess that is a standard operating procedure that has changed too. But what was it that I had highlighted? thank you for the moment of silence earlier. Gun violence is a frustrating issue, not just on a local stage, but a national stage. And I think that we have a lot of different issues within this community, but that is one that I think that we need to continuously advocate, whether it's internally and obviously externally on a state and federal level.
Thank you. Commissioner Urban?
Thank you, Mayor Anderson. Since we are a new commission and we have new leadership, I want to just alert my colleagues of some things you might want to consider. Not this evening particularly, but we perhaps talking one-on-one amongst ourselves. Maybe at the next work session we could have a little time to devote to it. It's been my feeling that for many years we've had what's called an admin committee, which met to in advance of committee of the full commission meetings to discuss agenda items, and subsequently after the admin committee met, we'd have small groups, and anybody who was in a small group felt they got kind of like some decisions got made in advance, and whatever decisions were made, the options that were considered but rejected, we never heard about. And since we're all equals as commissioners in terms of voting power and so forth, it seems like all of us should have equal access to those preliminary discussions, and how to do that without violating the Open Meetings Act. That's the issue. The county found a way to do that. That's one option. There are ways to deal with this. How big a problem it is to the rest of you may not be that much. But it's a concern that I've had for some time, and if it's a concern you share, perhaps we could arrive at something that we could pilot. Surely there are going to be problems with anything that involves another meeting, especially if city staff has to be there also. It takes time away from their normal other duties, which they're jammed up with already. So there are downsides to having another meeting. I just raise the issue because now we have an opportunity to consider some basic matters of procedure. I just named one. You may have others. Now's a good time to bring it up in the next 6 weeks or so. That's all.
Thank you, Commissioner Urban. Commissioner Prado.
Just wanted to take a moment to both thank our colleagues, but also the city staff for being very patient with us as the newbies on the commission. City staff stayed late for, I think, about 3 hours last week, providing us with our new commissioner orientation. And so I want to thank city staff for their time last week to spend with us and answering our questions. Also just wanted to take a moment, one of the things that we learned from Director Baker is the fact that there are about 38 people within his department that do snow removal, leaf pickup, holiday prep, and then also did some of the signage install for the new crosswalks that all kind of coincided at one period. And so I just wanted to thank those individuals. Those individuals from Public Works were actually on my street this week, or today actually, and I was quite impressed with the thoroughness that they took to make sure that as much as the leaves were frozen onto the street and sidewalks, that they took great care to try to remove everything. I know it's frustrating for citizens, when there's a snow incident, when we're losing a lot of leaves, but I do know that there are 38 people who are multitasking to a major degree to make all that happen within a very short amount of time. So I want to thank them for all their hard work and dedication to make that possible. Also want to just acknowledge, I know City Attorney Robinson and members of public safety attended the Millwood Neighborhood Association last week to talk about the implications of marijuana in our city, and did a great job presenting to the neighborhood and providing some insight about how that process is going, and what will be coming in the short term. So I just want to acknowledge that work and their extra time to be there for the Millwood Neighborhood Association. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hess?
Sure. I'd like to echo Chris's comments, thanking the city staff for being so patient and so informing of us as newcomers. There will be a learning curve, and I look forward to all of the time that we're going to spend together learning this. And Jack, I'm interested to see what might come of our increased our interactions. I'd like to say that the first time that I actually participated in a meeting in this chamber was in 2006. When I moved out of my office at Kalamazoo College, I found an agenda which looks remarkably like the agendas that still happen. And I was the person doing the invocation. As associate chaplain at Kalamazoo College, I was asked to come forward and pray for the city. I prayed for the people who work here, the people that have charge of this city, for our safety, for our well-being, and for our moving forward together. I've always been a coach, and I've always tried to bring groups together. That said, I believe that community literally means to have charge of together, and I will do everything in my seat here to listen and to bring people together around greater issues. It's been a whirlwind week of ceremony, of learning, of orientation, of parade. Thank you, Mayor, for being literally like the mayor from the Monopoly game, and inspiring. And it was very inspiring to me to see our community come out and celebrate a new season and holidays. And knowing that city staff took great pains to make that all come together was inspiring to me. But then today, attending the Housing Resources open house, it is a lot of information to take in and to assimilate and to bring to this dais. And I ask for patience, but I also am willing to do the work. I want to hit the ground running. So, and that said, this morning I read an article from The Atlantic where Fred Rogers was, with the new movie coming out about Mr. Rogers, and like I know Don Cooney used to quote Kennedy and all of these. I'm going to quote Mr. Rogers. And given, and following up on Mayor Anderson's comments last week, even more obvious is what his position would have been regarding the civility debate. Fred was a man with a vision, and his vision was of the public square, a place full of strangers transformed by love and kindness into something like a neighborhood. That vision depended upon civility, on strangers feeling welcome in the public square, and so civility couldn't be debatable. It couldn't be subject to politics, but rather had to be the very basis of politics, along with everything else worthwhile. So on my comments by saying, I believe that we are participating in everything else worthwhile. And all the citizens who come forward to talk and to tell us where they are and what they're thinking are valuable to me. And as I move forward, again, being out in the community, I look forward to hearing from each and every one of you. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Griffin.
Yes, I want to thank you for coming to the podium, sir, and giving your suggestions about how we can be more transparent in this process. And that really kind of brings me to a bigger point that I want to make this evening. Even though, Steve, you had to answer on behalf of all of the parties this evening, what I really want to task everyone in this room, everyone listening, all of us on this commission here is being proactive with making sure you have voices at the table. So the reason why the Youth Mobility Fund and all of these amazing programs are able to happen is because there was a huge push with IK 2025 to have community input. If you're ever in a room, and let me backtrack before I move any further. So city, as commissioners and city staff, we should have that lens with everything. So if you ever enter a room where a decision is going to be made, and you look around that room and you notice that there's some absence in that room with people who are directly impacted or people who are directly involved in this, then it is your responsibility to say, hey, wait a minute, before we make that decision, let's make sure X, Y, and Z is in this room. That is the only way that collectively we're going to move forward as a community. There will be issues with a lot of things. As you know, the society is complex. But in order for us to move forward collectively, I feel like that needs to happen, and we all have that responsibility and duty to do so.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. First of all, I want to thank every commissioner who's serving up here. It is a time of Thanksgiving, and we're heading into that season. We will be celebrating Thanksgiving before our next meeting, and I just really appreciate everyone's effort and thoughtful comments. You all take this seriously, and I appreciate that very much. As far as order goes, you know, I want to jump around on that just a little bit. So one person is not always the first person to talk. So I guess you took that one tonight. You can be last next time if you'd like, Commissioner Cunningham. I just want to share that in a fair way. So once again, our next business meeting is on December 2nd. It's a Monday. We will be all celebrating Thanksgiving one way or another and recognizing the benefits that we do have in our lives, our friends, our family. And I do want to make sure that during this time of Thanksgiving that we make sure that we're taking care of each other. And once again, not leaving people out. I appreciate that. And that we celebrate with kindness. In addition, after our business meeting on the 2nd, we do have our first budget session, which is the week later on Monday, the 9th. That's, as Manager Ritzma indicated, that's starting at 5 o'clock, correct? That is, as everything that we do is an open meeting, so you're welcome to attend. And that is the time when we'll be looking at the budget, which will be coming to the commission and anyone else who wants to see it. Due to the charter, it is due to us by December 1st. So we will have that budget in our hands, and we'll be taking a month or two to go through that budget. That budget is ably prepared for us by city staff, but it is our responsibility to scrutinize that budget and make sure it aligns with our values within the confines of it must be a budget that balances. So we cannot determine that we want to spend more money than we have to spend. That's not how the Home Rule City Act works in the state of Michigan. We're required to have a balanced budget. So choices will have to be made, and some things that we desire we will not be able to fund. But this is our opportunity to make those hard choices together. So I appreciate everyone's input. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. And with that, we are adjourned.